Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, this lovely morning, looks like we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. We're in the 5th canto, which is entitled Creative Impetus. And we're in chapter 5, Lord Vrishabhadeva's teachings, text 4. Nunam pramatta kuru. What's the meter there? Nunam pramatta kurute vikarma. Your turn.
Nunam pramatta kurute vikarma.
Yadindriya pritaya prinoti.
Yadindriya pritaya prinoti.
Sadhu manye yatatmanoyam.
Sadhu manye yatatmanoyam.
Asannapi kleshada sadeha.
Asannapi kleshada sadeha.
Would anyone like to chant?
Nunam pramatta kurute vikarma.
Nunam pramatta kurute vikarma.
Yadindriya pritaya prinoti.
Yadindriya pritaya prinoti.
Sadhu manye yata atmanoyam.
Sadhu manye yatatmanoyam.
Kleshada sadeha.
Asannapi kleshada sadeha.
Nunam pramatta kurute vikarma.
Nunam pramatta kurute vikarma.
Pritaya
Yadindriya pritaya prinoti.
sadhu manye yatatmanoyam.
Sadhu manye yatatmanoyam.
Kleshada sadeha.
Asannapi kleshada sadeha.
Nunam pramatta kurute vikarma.
Nunam pramatta kurute vikarma.
Yadindriya pritaya aprinoti.
Yadindriya pritaya prinoti.
Sadhu manye yata atmanoyam.
Sadhu manye yatatmanoyam.
Asannapi kleshada sadeha.
Asannapi kleshada sadeha.
Nunam pramatta kurute vikarma.
Nunam pramatta kurute vikarma.
Yadindriya pritaya prinoti.
Yadindriya pritaya prinoti.
Sadhu manye yatatmanoyam.
Sadhu manye yatatmanoyam. Asannapi kleshada sadeha.
Nunam pramatta kurute vikarma.
Nunam pramatta kurute
Yatindriya Pritaya Prinoti
Yadindriya Pritaya Prinoti
Sadhu Manye Yatatmanoyam
Sadhumanye Yatmanoyam
Asannati Sada Shadeha
Asani Sadeha.
Good. All right. Word meanings. Nunam.
Nunam.
Indeed. Pramattaha.
Pramattaha.
Met.
Met.
Kurute.
Kurute.
Performs.
Performs.
Vikarma.
Vikarma.
Sinful activities.
Sinful activities.
Forbidden in the scriptures.
Forbidden in the scriptures.
Yat.
Yat.
When.
When.
Indriya Pritaye.
Indriya Pritaya.
For sense gratification.
For sense gratification.
Aprinoti.
Aprinoti.
Engages. Na. Not. Sadhu.
Sadhu.
Befitting.
Befitting.
Manye.
Manye.
I think. Yataha.
Yataha.
By which.
By which.
Atmanaha.
Atmanaha.
Of the soul.
Of the soul.
I am. This.
This.
Asan. Being temporary.
Being temporary.
Ati.
Ati.
Although.
Although.
Kleshada.
Kleshada.
Giving misery.
Giving misery.
Asa.
Asa.
Became possible.
Became possible.
Deha.
Deha.
The body.
Body.
Translation. When a person considers sense gratification the aim of life, he certainly becomes mad after materialistic living and engages in all kinds of sinful activity. He does not know that, due to his past misdeeds, he has already received a body which, although temporary, is the cause of his misery. Actually, the living entity should not have taken on a material body, but he has been awarded the material body for sense gratification. Therefore, I think it's not befitting an intelligent man to involve himself again in the activities of sense gratification, by which he perpetually gets material bodies one after another. Prabhupada's purport: begging, borrowing, and stealing to live for sense gratification is condemned in this verse, because such consciousness leads one to a dark, hellish condition. The four sinful activities are illicit sex, meat eating, intoxication, and gambling. These are the means by which one gets another material body that is full of miseries. In the Vedas, it is said, Asangyokyayam Purushaha. The living entity is not really connected with this material world, but due to his tendency to enjoy the material senses, he is put into the material condition. One should perfect his life by associating with devotees. He should not become further implicated in the material body. Om Adhyanatimidandasya Yananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Manchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindubhyeva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Very valuable instructions of Lord Rishabhadev here. I remember years ago, I don't know whether they did that on purpose or it just happened, but at the Gora Purnima festival in Mayapur, they would choose these verses every day for the Bhagavatam class. I mean, even the days when I joined, these were some of the, most often quoted verses. But in retrospect, I could also say that they were also perhaps also heavily misunderstood. Very simple instructions, very simple language. There's not a whole lot here to be philosophized about. Yet some or other we made a lot of mistakes, I would say, in regards to these instructions. First interesting thing I would notice here is that the title of the fifth canto of the Bhagavatam is Creative Impetus. In other words, there's an impetus for creation. And what is the impetus for creation? What would you say? And by the way, creation refers here to refers to the mundane creation or the creation of the mundane realm. What is the impetus? Yes. Passion, very good. Yeah, sure. Most definitely. What else? What is the impetus for the mundane creation or the creation of the mundane domain? Or the creations within the mundane domain?
Happiness.
Happiness? Who said that? Oh, that's also interesting. Why did you say that?
I don't know, like someone has some kids, family, because they want to have like a happy life.
Yeah. Good. Very true, yes.
I would say the impetus for activity changes based on that the personality. We may create something out of service for Krishna, or we may create something out of.
Okay, but the question is very specific, mundane creation. So now you're shifting over to transcendental creation. Yeah. Sense gratification, yeah. It is the sense gratification. Why does someone sense gratify? Yeah, I just remember a fellow I met in Pacific Beaches that was selling books, and he said, "Because it's awesome, man." It's interesting that there is an impetus to create this whole thing. I mean, Srila Prabhupada said things such as, very stingy statements, like, for example, that that all of this creation is a manifestation of sexual desire. The building, the economy, the whatnot. They even went on to say in the Bhagavatam, it's mentioned, like Prabhupada commenting, that if there was no sexual pleasure, hardly anyone would have children, for example. Interesting. So there is an impetus for creation, and the impetus is definitely happiness. But in the mundane dimension, the interpretation of how to gain happiness is different than the interpretation, let's say, of here Lord Rishabhadeva. And because of this different interpretation of what it means to secure your happiness, what we have is pramata. Mata means mad. And pra is an intensifier, means super mad. And this is the quality of the mode of passion. Mode of passion makes you lose your brain. Mode of passion is characterized by kama, or strong desire, which is quite different to yagya. They say that, once I heard this description of yagya, or sacrifice, as discovery of future. Why discovery of future? Because when you're under the influence of strong desire for pleasure, you're incapable of being conscious of the future, especially long-term future. That's why throughout history, every civilization had a very, very conservative attitude towards things that generate immense pleasure right now, such as narcotics. Like, I don't know if you, in the States, I didn't grow up in the States, I don't know. Did you, in school, perhaps learn of Chinese opium wars? Yeah. Those are, so, the government did not want British to pay China. That's where the word China comes from, porcelain, Chinese porcelain, like the best. They would pay it with opium. And then Chinese were getting heavily addicted. It ruins your life. Why does it ruin your life? Now I'm going to say something very much against the New Ager concept of life, because it makes you live only in the now. You're incapable of projecting yourself into the future. In a sense, you're unaware of the future. Also, when you're a child, you're stupid. You're incapable of being conscious of future. So that's why your parents have to take care of you. If it was left up to the child, you would have no teeth by the age of 7 due to eating only sugary things. Because immediate pleasure, there's no concept of future. And yagya is exactly the opposite. Yagya is that which helps you discover future. In other words, you understand that for the sake of future, I may need to sacrifice some of the presence. Some of the present, some of the present. Not presence, present. Not necessarily the whole thing, but some of it. And perhaps even a good chunk of it. And so the concept, the Vedic concept of life is that of sacrifice. And this is what Rishabhadev is trying to tell his 100 sons. And the other interesting thing is that by this time, when he's speaking this, he's mature. And what's interesting, most of us, as we mature, we experience chemical freedom from passion. When the body is young, full of, in males, it's testosterone, and female, I don't know what it is, but younger bodies are passionate. They're infused with impulse for sex, for consumption, it's just a lot of passion in the young body. And so as the chemicals age, if you remember Sura Prabhu from LA, I can't say what he said. Sorry, I'll tell you afterwards. It says something super funny, but a little bit inappropriate for the Bhagavatam class.
He said it in Bhagavatam.
He said it in the Bhagavatam class, but I won't. He did, yeah. As the chemicals mature, we seem to gain a little bit of freedom from these young, passionate urges. And so, if you have been on the transcendental path, as the chemicals age, you also actually experience some knowledge. And as you experience this knowledge, you can turn back and you can address your 100 young sons and tell them, don't do that. But okay, here we have Rishabhadev who perhaps didn't do it, but we all have. And most people will have to go through this cycle of passion and working out the passion to, hopefully become passionless towards the end of our lives. And so what's interesting that at least in the Vedic Vaishnava, definitely, concept of things, we don't negate this. Okay, that passion is there, and it's there from God. But why did you precisely deserve it is yet another thing. But it does come from God. Ultimately, everything comes from God. And so the point is not to necessarily murder it. I mean, if you can go without it, that's the best, trust me. That's like the best life ever. But for the most part, it's impossible. That's why you need to learn to live it in appropriate ways. And this is what we call the system of varnas and ashramas and so on. And so it is natural when you're young and passionate, you put that energy into economic development, into maintenance of family, into having your own family, and so on. But as the time goes on, as you chemically mature, as the passion subdues, then as Manusmriti, for example, says that samadhi comes natural as you age. I don't know if you notice, but seems like older you get, fewer friends you have, more quiet you want, more peace you want, more contemplative you become. Like it's a very natural way to end up in samadhi, like that. And so what Rishabhadev is saying here is very interesting, very valuable. But how do we deal with this? That's an art, because to attempt to do that which is impossible will not result in a good thing. And I think there lies a tremendous value of the Vaishnava culture. Not just culture, but tradition. Like, we're not new on the market. We've been around for a while. Maybe our Western chapter is relatively young. But if you look at the history of Vaishnavism, very mature, Vedic culture, very mature. How do you deal with the passion of the body? The best would be just to cut it out. But who has done that? Hardly anyone. And typically, as we age, becomes easier. So, no worries. Live your passion, but live it appropriately. I'm thinking, for example, of Srila Prabhupada, the way he harnessed the youthful passion of his young disciples to compete with each other. Who's going to sell more books? I remember when that was my service. We were passionate as hell. And in the process in that process, we've done a lot of service, did some damage too, that's how it goes. It's unavoidable. With all that passion, you have to create some damage. But a lot of service, tremendous amount of service. So like that, with every age comes something which is appropriate. The book of Ecclesiastes, the book of the Bible, Old Testament, says that there is appropriate time for everything. And so that's really the art of living. But it is very good to be educated about this right from the beginning. So the statement is, Nunam pramata kurute vika, that when someone is maddened by the mode of passion, by the attraction of sensual pleasures, one becomes like mad. Actually, here says super mad, and then performs vikarma. Now we can think of this word in at least two different ways. Vikarma in the sense of karma, akarma, vikarma. Whereas karma are good, pious activities. Vikarma are vicious activities. Vicious in the sense that they're contrary to dharma, contrary to the Vedic instructions. And then there is akarma, an activity that produces no bondage. So in that sense, Prabhupada seemed to have taken that meaning of the term here in the translation, that one performs sinful activities. Because that's what happens. And the other meaning is vikarma. It just means a lot of activity. A lot of activity. And this is the mode of passion, fueled by the sensual attraction. And if you, look at your own life or somebody else's life, those who want sense gratification, they need to work a lot. A lot. And it's one of those things that it's like a carrot on the stick. You can never quite get it. You're always almost there. And then you get it. And what's interesting, even when you get it, the capacity for further consumption increases. The appetite goes up. And as the appetite goes up, the consumption goes up. And as the consumption goes up, the experience goes down. It's a trap. And with every further consumption, the experience goes further down. And then you become really mad. At that point, people do bizarre stuff, like these Epstein files. I don't know. I mean, like, what's wrong with you, dude? Like, you go to an island to do what? I mean, at the age of 60, 70, you try to... It's insane. I don't know if you like. Do you know the city of Sarajevo? It's the capital of Bosnia, and during the civil war in the 90s, early 90s, you know, the city was surrounded, and then the people who surrounded the city were selling tickets for human safari. Like, you pay a lot of money and you can go, and you know, they give you a point from which you can, with the sniper, shoot humans. That's where it goes. And it's unbelievable how far people, like from Italy, from Germany, from America, like, it's insane. And people have been saying this because, you know, I go to Sarajevo once a year regularly. People have been saying this forever until recently some news reporter actually dug it all up, and now there's some court proceedings, even legal stuff. And, you know, so that's where it goes. Like, when it says pramata, mad, and vikarma, very true. And what's interesting, when you're covered over by it, you're covered over. And then there's a loss of freedom. I remember once I was driving we had a van, like a very old van. I mean, there were even holes in it, you know, rust holes. And it was loaded with books, and I was driving on the highway, and it broke down, you know, and without the engine going downhill, I managed to get off of the highway, and it stopped right in front of a super shiny building. Then out of that building, just when I stopped, I came out and looking what to do. People started to come out of the shiny building. They're all in shiny, men and women in shiny clothes. I was really out of place. And then one guy was looking at me. I became a little bit uncomfortable. I was contemplating whether to tell him take a picture lasts longer, which is a line I learned from Surah. Surah G. Learn a few good things from him. But just before I actually said it, the guy came over and he said, "Look at you and look at me." And then he says, "And the worst thing is, I have no strength to do anything about it." In other words, he made a comment about his own life, that he's living a materialistic life caught up in the cycle of earning and spending for nothing, you know, sense gratification. But I have no strength to do anything about it. And this is exactly what happens with sense gratification. And in the Bhagavad Gita, we have this, very interesting picture painted how the soul can get covered over to different degrees. And if you're lightly covered, you can do something about it. You can see it and you can do something about it. If you're covered over more, you can see the covering, you can see the conditioning, but you cannot wrestle away from it. And if you covered even more, neither can you get away from it, neither do you see it. Yeah. That's come. So these are very, very valuable instructions by Rishabhadev. And what's interesting that this impetus, this creative impetus, that it's an impetus for the creation of the whole mundane realm and everything in it. What we find here is also a veil, because the point of these teachings is not merely to cancel sensual gratification, but it's to, the purpose is to understand that there is a veil, a curtain that doesn't let you see what's behind it. And so what happens with this impetus is that you become unaware of a larger picture. And you become just like an animal led by the instincts to enjoy. But there is actually a purpose behind things. And it's actually quite interesting to see how many people are capable of even thinking of purpose of anything. Mostly people are caught up, dealing with impetuses, like impulses from one to another. But the ability to step away and try to look at the larger picture, so what the hell is all this about and what for? That ability is lost when one becomes mad like this. And it's considered some sort of madness. Anyhow, I even wrote it here for myself. A few years ago, I read a very interesting piece of literature, and it has also a chapter on psychological study of sexual impulse, and how much of the society it actually, according to the psychologists who wrote it, how much does it define the social dynamics, the makeup of the society? It's actually pretty incredible. Pretty incredible. Anyhow, some other time about it, I'll skip that. And so, yeah, the point is not just to cancel things, but actually the point is to escape the veil of illusion and to be able to see behind it, above it. Actually, I'll throw this in really quick. Generally, we see that when one endeavors for happiness, one suffers. Happiness, it seems that the formula is that you need to live for something important. And when you live and act for something important, then happiness becomes a byproduct. And so it seems that happiness ought to be a byproduct for it to be happiness. Otherwise, those who endeavor directly for happiness seem to actually suffer. And this goes very much along the very concept of Krishna consciousness, that your life is not valueless. As a matter of fact, your life is tremendously important. The goal of life is a tremendously important thing. Srila Prabhupada gave mission, but something very important to do. And if you endeavor for something which is valuable, very important, then happiness becomes a byproduct and really becomes happiness. Of course, we all need, a burfi here and there or something like that. But to make happiness or sense gratification or pleasure immediate goal, that's a terrible mistake. That leads to pramata, super madness. It's a trap. So the body here is said to be a sun, temporary. And also klesha da. Klesha means misery. Da means give. That which gives you misery. I'm very interested, you know. Like all of your body can be exposed to pleasure. But if a little toe down there is in pain, ruins the rest of the experience. I mean, maybe I was just going mad. Maybe it was all the drugs we took as kids, or I don't know what. But at one point, I started to become aware how much pain is there coming from the body. Like I noticed how the head is super heavy. You have to carry the damn thing all day long. And even when you sleep, it kind of falls over, and then you get a, creation is my mother tongue, and in creation, you don't say you go on a walk. You say you're gonna walk yourself. So, it's interesting how people have a tendency to look at this body as some kind of a reward. But from the Vaishnava point of view, this body is a reward, but it's also a punishment. And it's given to you as a punishment. But the point of punishment is actually education, because anyone who's emotionally healthy punishes only because it's absolutely necessary, and it is in order to realize reward. If you could realize reward in any other way, you would. But sometimes punishment is exactly what's needed. Like there is no other way around it. So that seems to be the position of the soul in this world. It's given this blessing, which is actually a curse, but it's actually a blessing. It is that which gives pain, but it gives pain in order to give ultimately pleasure. But it's not going to happen automatically. Kaumara acharet pragya dharman bhagavataniha. How does it go? This is Prahlad. Kaumara acharet pragya dharman bhagavataniha. At the end, there's something about the body being temporary. Tat api adruvam artadam. Thank you. Adruva, even though dhruva means fixed, and adruva not fixed, unstable, but it's artadam. It gives great value, but only if you do what Prahlad is saying, kaumara acharit, that you start the process of education, pragya, which means transcendental education, right from the beginning. Otherwise, you just grow an old fool. There's a saying, there's no fool like an old fool. And so what's interesting in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, and I'll end there. One should perfect his life by associating with devotees. He should not become further implicated in the material body. This is a very short reference to spiritual culture. So we're not the body, we have a body. Body is not permanent. It is very, very temporary, and it seems older you get, since you seem to be acutely more aware how short-lived the darn thing is. But it is very valuable. And it is very valuable because one can pursue self-realization. And in the self-realization lies the culture of having a body that has all these characteristics and living in it, with it, in this world. That you're actually satisfied, happy, and you move on from a better place to yet even better place. Ultimately to the best place. Spiritual culture, how to live in this body, in this world, in appropriate ways. And as I said, our Western chapter is relatively young. We made a bunch of mistakes. For example, when I joined the movement, it was embarrassing to be a grihasta. And then, oh, it is? Really? Oh, you guys haven't advanced then. And I remember, like, poor friends of mine, they would come to the point where they couldn't be brahmacharis anymore. And they'd be, like, chewing their fingernails. And then they would marry, and then, no one would make fun of them in their face, but behind their backs. You could hear the crickets, if you remember the Bhagavatam 5th canto. You look at the source where the noise is coming from, you don't see anyone. But you hear the, Okay, I shall end here and invite you to comment or ask questions if anyone has anything. She had her hand first, then I saw your hand second.
Hare Krishna, thank you. Thank you for joining us here. I was curious, so happiness comes on its own accord, right? To sense gratification.
Happiness comes on its own accord. And then you said what? Like
a certain amount of sense gratification Krishna will give, type of thing. But I
didn't understand that statement. Sorry.
In the same way that happiness comes on its own accord, we see we're faced with distress and unwanted things as well. Does the happiness that comes on its own accord allude to greater happiness, or could you explain the difference between somebody who's perceiving something as happiness versus happiness that's kind of lasting and progressive?
Years ago, I read only one chapter from a book because I had no interest in the rest of the book. But just one chapter. It was some French author, and I can't remember his name. And he differentiated pleasure from happiness, where he said that the pleasure is the happiness for fools, and the happiness is the pleasure for sages. Now, what we have here is, of course, play. It's a semantic play. We're playing with words, but it's important in order to understand, you have to glean the meaning of the terms that the person's using. But what's interesting that he differentiated pleasure from happiness. And so, here pleasure would be a sense of happiness, a sense of comfort. And, how do you define pleasure? Whether mental, sensual, or whatnot. But if you're a sage, if you're, in other words, someone who's deep, then you're not going to be searching for happiness there. And then he used another analogy. He said that the seeking happiness in pleasure is like seeking sunshine in a deep cave facing north. I guess Guy spoke from a personal realization. I could almost feel his pain, you know. Must have made mistakes a lot of the time, you know. So in Krishna consciousness, like in the Vaishnava tradition, like the Bhagavad Gita, for example, the picture we get is that first you refer to happiness coming of its own accord. It doesn't always come on its own. You could actually trigger it, you know. But pain and pleasure, according to the Bhagavad Gita, they come and go like summer and winter. And it's not that there's nothing you can do about it. You can do, but they, no matter the amount of arrangements you do in this world, they're going to be swapping. You know, there's happiness and there's pleasure and there's pain. They keep swapping. Yeah. But happiness seems to be the property of the soul. In other words, it is the satisfaction of the soul. And you find this, like for example, in relationships. If you have friends, you can have a superficial relationship with someone. But if you want happiness, you want to have a deeper relationship with someone. And what does it mean to go deeper into a relationship? It means that you go beyond the details into the eternal principles of nature of things. And ultimately what you come to are some eternal things, such as the soul, such as the unalloyed love, which we call prema, where you and another person have something in common, and that is that both of you are part and parcels of the divine person, Krishna, like that. And so that's where you start to experience happiness. And this other stuff, it's more like disturbance on the surface. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. That was incredible class.
Thank you.
So you mentioned this pramata, which is this madness after sense gratification. You mentioned how dark it gets, and of course we know people who are in that dark space. And we've seen like you brought up some incidences in the world, like the Epstein thing, and so many things. But simultaneously, we see that sometimes with devotees, and I mean all devotees, not just brahmacharis, but also grihastas, we find that there's sense gratification, within the devotional service. Like you said, a piece of burfi comes here and there. Grihastas have their sense gratification, but we see that the result's not the same. But the tendency to think when we read a verse like the tendency to think is that, I have to avoid all sense gratification. I was wondering if
sleep on the bed of nails.
I was wondering if you could kind of differentiate between. If you could differentiate between how this applies to devotees and how this is. You brought up some heavy materialistic, circumstances in regards to this verse. So I was wondering if you can get a little light on that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No. We have sort of demonized sense gratification, but sense gratification is good. And it's even necessary. But there is a point in which you go into the domain of unnecessary sense gratification. Like, eyes need to see beautiful things. If you were exposed to horrible images all the time, you would go insane. The skin needs to have pleasant experiences. Ears, can you imagine if you only heard horrible sounds, shriekings, you would go insane. For example, food has to be tasty. Because if you experience that want for food out of it being pleasurable, then the fire digestion goes up. That's just how it goes. That's Ayurveda, some little thing I know about it. So food has to be, if you ate only distasteful things, then again, you would survive it. Especially with the age. Like there's a reason why food needs to be tasty. There is a reason why Prabhupada went on morning walks, because it's pleasurable. Because body needs certain pleasure. Senses require certain pleasure. But what's interesting, it's like exercise. Exercising is painful. But it sort of resets things so you can actually enjoy better. That's what I'm saying now. So there is that element of, what we call tapasya. But to go back, generally, every body, physical body, requires pleasure. But now the question, you see, the moral value of an act is hardly ever found in the act itself. The moral value seems to be found rather in the reasons for which someone has done an act.
Seeking purpose and pleasure.
Correct. If you live for pleasure, you live in vain. Like they say, you should eat to live, not live to eat. So, like Prabhupada would sense gratify, like go on a morning walk, or see beautiful things. In LA, when Prabhupada was in LA, devotees would put flowers, fragrant flowers on his pillow, so that when he would sleep, he would be smelling the sweet fragrance of the flowers. But that's nice. It's good. Everybody requires something. But why? The question is, why do you do it? If you live for self-realization, ultimately for God's pleasure, if you live for that love union with divine, then everything you do is done not for that, but for this ultimate purpose. And so it becomes way different. And therefore, there is something such as inappropriate or unnecessary, unhealthy, not needed sense gratification. And that's what results in Ramada. Thank you, Maharaj. Beautiful answer. Oh man, you make me feel beautiful. Thank you. Yes. I didn't ask, what's the time?
I got that.
Okay.
Yeah. When I read really heavy verses and purports like this, and then when I'm sharing them with people who don't know much about Krishna consciousness, I find myself editing. Instead of saying sense gratification, I'll say sense indulgence, so they get the point.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you do that too, or what do you think of that?
Oh, definitely. I think anyone who is not mindless when communicating with someone tries to communicate successfully. In other words, because words are just a media that convey an abstract reality. So words are concrete things, a vehicle for abstract meaning. And you may notice also how the meaning of the words changes, like due to context, sometimes due to age also, as we start to use words differently and so on. So, in other words, if you're a sensible person, when you're communicating with someone, you don't want the person merely to hear a word. You want the person to understand the abstract reality that the word is trying to transfer over.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, he beat you by a fraction of the second.
Mine's quick, I think. Thank you. Thank you. I'm just going to repeat what I heard, and maybe it'll contribute something. The talk made me think that we hear chant and be happy. I heard Indrajumna Swami say that originally Srila Prabhupada said, chant and be sublime. And I realize I don't specifically directly know the difference, but
Yeah.
It reminds me of what we were talking
Yeah,
about.
good one.
Oh, it
Thank
makes me want to look up sublime and what
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
exactly means.
you. Yeah, good one. Thank you. Yes. So you live here now?
Yeah,
I think last time I saw you was in LA, like
yeah,
20 years ago,
yeah,
maybe
like
even
in the
more.
90s, yeah. Yeah, I was in Nevada for a long time, and then
Ah,
now here,
mm.
yeah.
You teach yoga
Yes, yeah,
and dance also, right?
yeah,
Still going on?
yeah. So you were talking about like people doing abominable things like in their 60s, you know, like what was going on. So,
Oh, why only in the 60s even?
no, you were talking, yeah, I mean, specifically.
Those people from the 60s. man.
Right. Yeah. So, you know, I mean, people can be sadistic. I mean, just all kinds of things are going on, even at that age. You know, is that because, would you say it's because they're really afraid to deeply love? Because you were talking about love becoming deep. You know, is it like just fear of that? So they react, you know, impulsively in a way, coming from the false ego, you know, and the fear, instead of going into the depth of love.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, you know what? You just, okay. I'll try to be super brief, but what you have, that's a very deep thing that you said. I mean, okay, I'll try to. There are definitely more reasons than that as to why that happens. But I think you have identified a very interesting psychological phenomenon, which I read about many moons ago. I remember also reading somewhere. It's interesting that in the profession of psychology, they speak of inability to love. And for the very reason you said, and that is that especially people who grew up in an environment where the concept of love is very crooked. Even if they extricate themselves from that environment and find themselves having their own family or whatnot, they say that they're incapable of loving because it's an uncharted territory for them, unknown. And so they rather revert back to the twisted concepts of love because it's familiar. And this is one of the reasons why people are afraid of being honest or being truth seekers, even devotees, even people in religion. Like, we have a tendency to want to reinforce our convictions rather than being honest with ourselves. And I personally think that without honesty, there is no deep transformation. But with honesty comes a risk that you may not agree with. But therefore, one prefers so-called safety of the known for the unsafety of the unknown. And same holds true for love. And when I say love, there's nothing but love. There's no divine love. There's only perversion of divine love or partial manifestations of that we find in the love between people, between whatever. And so I found that with myself, and I was shocked. For a while, an assistant of mine, I always typically have someone to travel with me. And this assistant of mine, I thought was a, better devotee than myself. And I'm not trying to be humble or something, like make a show of it or something. No, I truly felt like this person is a better devotee than me. And the way it was kind to me, like it was disarming me. And I was like, no, I don't know how to deal with that. Like, and I would revert back to being rigid, my rigid self, because there I know everything, it's in my box. And when he would pull me out of that box with his kindness, I was getting lost. Like, what is this territory? Bizarre. But I don't think that's the only reason. But it's one of the reasons why people generally are not truth seekers, and you can see that in the domain of love. Hope you don't mind me throwing in a little mix of psychology.
No.
But yeah, I found it very, relevant to Krishna consciousness. All right, shall we end here? We're good? Okay. Tirtha Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur